Hello everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to build a very beautiful UI in React Native using Tailwind CSS. We're going to make a travel app and you will learn a lot of things while creating this UI. So let me show you the demo of the application. So here we have a welcome page, and once you hit on let's go, you will see a home page. There you can see all the destinations. Here we have a search button, then we have some categories that you can scroll through. You can choose the filters for all the destination, and then at the last we have all the destination. You can toggle this favorite icon, and once you open the destination you can see all the details about this, like price, distance, and weather conditions. You can hit the book now button, and similarly you can go to other destinations and it will show all their details here. And by the way, this app is fully responsive as well, so you can use this on any device and it will show as it is. So this is what we'll be building in this video, and if you want to create professional designs in React Native, then this is a video for you. If you find this video very helpful, do like the video and subscribe the channel, and let's get started. We're going to use React Native Expo to create our application. Then we're going to use Native Wind to style our app. Native Wind is a package that lets us use Tailwind classes to style React Native components. Some of you guys mentioned that Native Wind is not working for them, so my suggestion is don't use the latest Tailwind CSS version. Instead, you can use the version 3.3.2. I've tested it and it works fine. I've already created a video on how you can set up Native Wind in React Native, so I'll leave the link of the video in the description. Then we are going to use React Native navigation to navigate between different pages. I've already created an Expo app and implemented React navigation. Here you can see the app, and this is the app navigation. So if I open the navigation, I've implemented a very simple navigation with the home route as the default one. I've provided some screen options to hide the header. I've leave the link of this video in the description. So for the folder structure, we have the constants folder to hold all our data or the dummy data. We have navigation folder for this one, and then we have a screens folder to hold all our screens. For now, we only have home screen that you're seeing on the device. Then we have a themes folder to hold all our theme configuration like colors. I've already added some of the assets that we're going to use into this application. These are some of the images that I found online. You can find all of these images from my GitHub repo for this project. Okay, so let's start designing our application. First, we need to go to app navigation. And here I've already implemented a home route, but we're not going to show the home route by default. We're going to add a welcome page. So for that, let's create a screen for welcome. This will be welcome screen. And let's create a basic functional component, and we need to import this in app navigation. Let's just copy this route and we'll call this welcome, and we need to import the welcome screen here. And let's change the initial route name to welcome, and when I refresh the application we should be seeing the welcome page. So let's refresh. Okay, we can see the welcome page. So let's go to welcome screen and start designing. First, we're going to add a class name of flex1 and flex. Then we need to add justify end because we're going to show the content at the end of the screen. Here we're going to have a background image, and let's import the image component, and the source will be the source from our assets which I've already stored, and the image name is called welcome.png, like this. Let's give it a class name of height full and width full, like this. And when I save this, you will see our welcome image. Okay, we need to make it absolute because we're going to have the content on top of it. So let's give it a class name of absolute, like this. Now here we're going to have a content and a gradient behind this that we'll add later. So let's add a view and give it a padding 5 and padding bottom of 10 and vertical spacing of 8. Okay, we need to have another view for our contents, and let's give it a vertical spacing of 3. And inside this we're going to add text view, and that will say traveling made easy. Okay, so you can see the text at the bottom, but we need to give it some style. So let's add a class name, and we're going to add the class name text white, fonts bold, and text size should be 4 XL. Actually, let's give it 5 XL. Okay, now looking good. Don't worry about the size of the text because we're going to make it responsive later. So let's add another text view for the punchline. Let's give it a class name of text neutral 200 and fonts medium. And let me just copy and paste the punchline here like this. Now let's add a button at the bottom. So let's use our touchable opacity component and use a text view inside this, and this will say let's go. Let's style this text with the class name of text white, and font should be bold. Let's also design our button as well. So let's give it a class name of background orange 500, margin horizontal of auto to make it centered, padding 3, and padding horizontal of 12, and rounded full. Okay, so now we need to make our application responsive so that it looks good on all the other devices. And for that, we can use the dimensions of the current device as well, but we're going to use a component that's called React Native Responsive Screen. I've already installed this, so go ahead and install this using this command. This package uses height and width percentages of the current device, and using that, it lets us make anything responsive. Here you can see the usage of this library. So let's import this library in our component. First, let's use the WP method to make this font size responsive, and we can give the value of WP10, and that will mean the 10% of the total width of the device. Now this text will be responsive for all of the devices. So let's also give a font size to this text view as well. Let's give it a font size of WP4. And now in the last, we need to add a font size for this text, and let's give it a font size of WP 5.5. Okay, so now we need to add a gradient behind this content so that we can see this content clearly, and for that we are going to use a component expo linear gradient. I've already installed this into the project, so go ahead and install this. Let's just import this here, and let's use it after this button. Now to configure this linear gradient, we're going to add colors, and this will be an array of all the colors. First color will be transparent, and the second will be a specific bluish color, and the values for that will be 3, 105 and 161, and the opacity will be 0.8. Then we're going to add a style and give it a height and width using our WP methods, and the height will be HP60 like this. Then we're going to add a starting and ending point for this linear gradient, and just give it the values of x 0.5 and y 0, and for the end point just give it the value to x 0.5 and y will be 1. Now we need to add a class name of absolute and bottom 0 so that it sticks at the bottom. And when I save this, you will see our linear gradient. Okay, we need to move it on the top so that it goes behind the content. So let's just add it here like this and save it. Now we can see the content clearly. So this part is finished. Now we need to move to the home screen when we click this button, and for that we need to use our use navigation hook. So let's declare that navigation, and we're going to use navigation hook, and let's add an on press method on this touchable opacity, and we're going to use the navigate method, and we need to pass the route name as home. Okay, so now when I click on this button, we will be redirecting to home screen. Let's move to home screen and start designing. First of all, let's give it a class name to this safe area view, flex1, and background of white. Now we're going to have a scroll view inside this to have all the content so that user can scroll through it. Let's hide a vertical scroll bar indicators, and let's give it a class name of vertical spacing 6. Okay, so here we need another view for our avatar, so let's add a comment for avatar, and let's add a view and give it a class name of mx5, which will be horizontal margin of 5, and we need to make it flex row, because we're going to add a text and the avatar side by side. So item center and margin bottom of 10. Let's add a text view that will say let's discover, and let's add a class name for this. We need to make it bold, so fonts bold, and the text color will be neutral 700, like this. Now we need to make it responsive and give it a font size. So for that we're going to use the library width percentages. Let's copy it from welcome component to here, and we can use the WP method to make the font size to 7, and this will be responsive for all of the devices. Let's add a touchable opacity, and inside this we're going to have an image for our avatar, and the source will be an image from our assets, and the image name is called avatar.png, I believe. Let's give it a style and height of WP12 and width of WP12 as well. Let's save this. Now we can see the icon and the text. Now I need to give a margin top to this view, and that will be different for iOS and Android devices. So we need to check if the current device is the iOS or not, and for that we can use the platform object from React Native. We can check if the OS property equals iOS, that means the current device is iOS, otherwise it's an Android device. So using this iOS property, we're going to add a top margin, and if it's an iOS device, we're going to add margin top of 3, otherwise the margin top will be 10. So now we can use this top margin in scroll view. So let's add brackets and add our top margin like this. Now the Android users will have a margin top and the content will look good. So now let's add a search bar view. Now let's add a view and give it a class name of margin horizontal of 5 and margin bottom of 4. Let's add another view for the bar, and let's give it a class name of flex row, item center and background of neutral 100, and it should be rounded full. Let's add a padding of 4 as well, spacing horizontal of 2 and padding left of 6. Okay, you can see the bar, but we need to add a search icon and the search input inside this. And for the icons, we're going to use hero icons, and the library for that is called React Native Hero Icons. I've already installed this into my application, so make sure you install this, and also make sure you install React Native SVG as well. And if you scroll down, you will see how you can import the icons and use them into your application. So let's go to our application and import this library. There are basically two types of icons. One is the outline one and the second is the solid ones. We're going to use the outline icons, and the icon here we're going to use is called magnifying glass icon. So we can just import it like this, and let's add it here. And first we need to give it a size of 20 and the stroke width of 3, and then the color of the icon, which will be gray. And when I save this, you will see we have the icon here. Then we're going to add a text input. Let's add a placeholder for this text input, which will be search destinations. Then a color for this placeholder, which will be gray. And let's give it a class name of flex1 because it's going to take full space. Text base and margin bottom of 1, padding left of 1, and tracking will be wider. This is for the text content. Let's save this. And now we have a search bar for our destination where you can type the destination names like this. Next, we're going to add another view for all our categories. So let's add a comment for categories. And let's add a view and give it a class name of margin bottom of 4. Inside this view, we're going to have a component for all the categories. So let's add a components folder. And let's also create a component for the categories. Let's create a basic functional component and rename it to categories. Now we need to import this function inside this view. Categories, this will auto import. And when I save this, you will see the categories component. So let's go to categories and start designing. Let's add a class name to the container to have a vertical spacing of 5. like this. Let's add another view for the categories text, and let's give it a margin horizontal of 5, flex row, justify between, and item center. Now let's add a text for the categories, and let's give it a class name of font semi-bold, and the text color will be neutral 700. We also need to make our font size responsive, and for that we're going to use the same library to use the weight percentage of the device. So let's copy this library from our home component. We need to copy this line. Let's copy it here, and we need to use the WP method and give it a value of 4. Okay. So now let's add a touchable opacity because we're going to have a button here, and let's add a text view inside this, and this will say see all, and let's give it a font size of WP4 as well. And because this is a button, we're going to style it differently. We're going to have a different color for this text, and I've already stored some of the colors into my theme folder. So if I open the theme folder, you will see we have a index.js file. Here I have a theme object where a background is a function that receives an opacity for this color, and text is just a static color. We're going to use this text and background functions to style our application. So let's use the text property for now. Let's use the theme object and use the text property. The benefit of keeping all these colors in one place is that you can just change this one time and all the colors will be changed. So let's add a scroll view for all the categories. This will be horizontal, and let's add a content container style with the horizontal padding of 15, and let's give it a class name of spacing horizontal 4, and let's hide our scroll bar indicators as well. Here we're going to use the dummy data for all the categories. I've already added some of the dummy data for these categories into constants folder. So if I open the index.js file, you will see we have a categories data array, and each category has a title and the image. We have ocean, mountain, sunset, hiking, beach. We have all the categories that we're going to use. So let's import this dummy data here. This is called categories data, and we're going to loop through all of the categories, and we're going to receive a callback with category and an index. We're going to return a touchable opacity. Let's add a key for each item as an index and give it a class name of flex, and let's give it a class item center and spacing vertical of 2. So here we're going to have an image for the category, and source will be the category.image, and the class name will be rounded 3xl, and let's also give it a style to have a width and the height for this image, and the width will be WP20 and height will be WP19. Okay, so once I save this, you will see all the category images, and you can even scroll through all of the categories. Now we need to add a text view at the bottom to show that category title. So let's add a text view, and here we're going to use the title property. So let's style it and give it a class name of text neutral 700 and fonts medium. Let's also give it a responsive font size using our WP method, and let's give it a value of WP3. Okay, so with this our category component is finished, and you can scroll through all of the categories. Now let's go back to home screen, and here we're going to display sort categories for all the destinations at the bottom. So let's add a view. Actually, let's just copy this one and paste it here, and we're going to have a sort categories component. So let's create a sort categories component file, and let's create a basic functional component. Let's rename it because all the components should start with a capital letter, and let's use it here, sort categories. This will auto import. Okay, now let's move to sort categories and start designing. Let's give it a class name of flex row, justify around, item center, and margin horizontal of 4. We're going to have a background of neutral 100, and it should be rounded full. Okay. And here we're going to display all of the sort categories that I've already stored into my constants file. So if I move to index.js file in constant, you can see we have an array of all the set categories and we're going to use them here. So let's loop through sort categories and we're going to have a sort category and an index, and we're going to return a touchable opacity, and let's add a text view that will show the sort title. Okay, so we're showing all the sort categories. Now let's add a key property for each child, and that will be the index. Let's also give it a class name of padding 3 and padding horizontal of 4 and rounded full, and it's going to have a value for flex like this. And let's also give a padding to the container to padding horizontal of 4 and spacing horizontal of 2 as well. Okay, now looking good. Now these are clickable buttons. Now we need to have an active button as well. So let's add a state for the active sort and set active sort function. And by default, this is going to have a value for the popular sort category. Now using this state, we can show the active sort category differently. So let's add a value to check if the current category is active. Let's add a condition where sort equals active category. If it's true, we're going to have a active clause button, and this will have a value of background white and a shadow if this category is active. Otherwise, it's going to have an empty string. Now let's wrap this class with brackets and use backticks because we're going to use this variable inside this class. Let's add $sign to add this variable active button class. Okay, now you can see the active button class differently. So we're going to toggle this using this button. So let's add an onPress method here. And we're going to set the current iteration value to set active sort. Let's give it a value of sort. Now when we click on any other category, this will be activated like this. Okay, now we need to style this text as well. So let's give it a class name of font semi bold. And to make our font size responsive, we're going to use the same library that we used before. So let's copy this responsive library from our home screen. We're going to copy our WP and HP methods from here and copy them here. And let's give it a value of WP4. And the color for this text will also be different based on this condition. So if the current iteration is active, then we're going to have a color from our theme which we used before. So it's theme.text. Otherwise, we're going to have a static black color. So let's use a static RGBA color. And the opacity will be 0.6. Let's save this and test this out. Okay, as you can see, the active sort category has a different style than the rest of the categories, and when I toggle this works as well. So now we're going to have the destinations at the bottom, and let's move to home screen. Let's just copy this view, and we're not going to have a margin bottom for this view. And let's also change the command to destinations, and we're going to add a component for the destinations. So let's create a destinations file inside components, and let's create a basic functional component, rename it, and let's import it here, destinations. Now let's move to destinations and start designing. Let's add a class name with the value mx4 that will be margin horizontal 4 and flex row and justify between. Now here we're going to add the dummy value for all the destination, and that I've already stored into my constants file. So here you can see we have the destination data as an array, and each item has this title, distance, weather, price, all this data for all the destination, and we have total 4 destinations. So we're going to use these destinations in here. So let's import them and loop through them. We're going to have a callback with an item and the item index. We're going to return a destination card that we will create in a second, and we need to pass the item and the key as an index to this component. Okay, so let's create this component here. Destination card. This is going to receive the item property, which will be each destination object. Let's add a text view to see the item title and see if it's all working. Okay, we can see all the title for all the destination and it's exceeding the width of the device. So let's add a flex wrap clause to the container. Okay, now it's fixed. Now let's move this and add a touchable opacity. And we're going to give it a style with the height and width. And for the width and height, we're going to use the same library for making height and width responsive. So let's just copy this from home screen and paste it here. And we're going to use the width of WP44 and the height will be WP65. Okay. Next, we're going to add a class name and let's give it a class of flex justify, and because content is going to be at the end of this card, this will be relative and padding of 4, padding vertical of 6, spacing vertical of 2 and margin bottom of 5. We had to make this relative because we're going to add an absolute image inside this touchable opacity. So let's add an image component, and the source for this image will be item.image. And let's give it a style using height and width. And let's just copy the style from touchable opacity because this aspect will be same for this image as well. Let's remove this extra bracket. Okay, so let's also give it a class name of absolute because we're going to add the content on top of this image. So let's save this, and now you can see all the images for the destination. We need to make it round, so let's add a property for the border radius, and that will be 35. Okay, looking good. Now we need to add the title and a short description for each destination, and for that we're going to use a gradient behind it so that we can see the content properly. And that gradient, let's just copy this from our welcome screen because we have this linear gradient here. So let's copy this whole code to here. Let's format this, and we need to import the linear gradient library as well. So let's copy this line and paste it here. Now we need to change some properties from here. So let's change this color to black. We will have all zeros here, and the opacity is 0.8. That's fine. The width will be 44, same as the image, and the height will be 15. Okay, so let's save this. Okay, now we have our linear gradient at the bottom of each destination image, and we need to make it round. So let's add border bottom left radius with a value of 35. And a border bottom right radius with the value of 35 as well. Okay, now it's matching the card style. Now we need to add the title and a short description for each destination. So let's add a text view, and here we're going to display the item title, and we're going to have another view for the item short description. Okay, now we can see the title and description. Now let's style our title and give it a class name of text white and font semi bold. Let's also give it a style and use our font size using our WP property and give it a value of 4. Now looking good. Now let's also give this a class name of text white, and we're going to make it really small. So let's use the font size of WP 2.2. Okay, so our destination card is almost finished. We have added the title and short description. We have added the gradient. So now we need to add a button here with the icon to mark this as favorite. So let's add a touchable opacity. And inside this, we're going to have a heart icon. So let's just auto import the heart icon from our hero icons. This is the outlined icon, but we need the solid icon here. So let's change the library to solid icons. Okay, and now we need to give it a size which will be WP5, and the color will be white for now. Okay, now you can see the heart icon, but we need to show it at the top right corner. So let's style this button. Let's give it a class name of absolute. Top value will be 1 and right will be 3, and a rounded full class. Okay. Now let's also give it a padding of 3 as well. Okay, now looking good. Now let's add a style because we're going to have a very subtle background color of white. So let's add a static color of RGBA white color, and the opacity will be 0.4, like this. Now you can see the background color as well. Now we need to be able to toggle this, and when it's active it needs to be red. So let's add a state for that. Is favorite and toggle favorite. By default this will be false. And now using this state we're going to change the color. So when we press on this touchable opacity, we're going to toggle the favorite state like this. And using this state we're going to have a different color for this heart icon. So when is favorite is true, we're going to have a red color, otherwise it's going to be white color. Now let's save this and see if it's working. Now we should be able to toggle this heart icon like this. Okay, so with this our home screen is finished. We have the search bar, we have all the categories, we have the sort categories, then we have all the destinations as well. We can toggle the favorite icon. Now we need to be able to move to the destination screen, so let's create a new screen. This will be destination screen, and let's create a basic functional component. Now we need to add this to app navigation, so let's just copy the welcome route and change this to destination, and we need to import the destination screen as well. Now we need to move to the destination screen when we click on this button, so let's add an onPress method to this card. We also need to use our navigation hook, so let's declare that in the parent container. Use navigation, and we need to pass it to the destination card like this, and we can receive it here. Now let's use this to navigate to the destination screen using the destination route. We also need to pass the item property because we're going to use the destination data in the destination screen. So now when we click on this, we are going to the destination screen. Now let's see if we're actually getting the item data in here. So let's receive the props and let's console log the item data item, and that can be found in props.route.params. Now let's save this, and you can see in the console we have the destination data that we can use to design the screen. So let's save this data in an item. Let's create a constant item and let's save this props.route.params. Now let's start designing this component, and let's give it a class of background white and flex one so that it takes all the space. Okay, so here we're gonna add a destination image, and that we can get from the item.image. So let's add a source that will be item.image that we paused from the previous component. And for the style, let's use our width and height percentage functions. So let's just copy them from our home screen. We need to copy this library here, and let's give it a full width of the device, and height will be 55. Let's save this, and now we can see the destination image. Now we're going to change the text color in the status bar, and for that we're going to use the status bar component from expo and give it a style of light that will change all the text color in the status bar like this. Now we're going to add two buttons on top of this image, so let's add a back button comment, and let's use the safe area view so that our buttons don't conflict with the notch area. And let's give it a class name of flex row, justify between item center and width full, and we need to make it absolute so that it goes over the image. So this is really important. Now here we're gonna add a back button, so let's add a touchable opacity and give it a class name of padding 2, and we need to make it round, so round it full and margin left of 4. Let's also give it a style property, and we need to have a subtle white color. So let's use the background color as a static color. This will be white color with an opacity of 0.5. And inside this we're going to add an icon, and that icon is called chevron left icon, which you can import from hero icons. And we need to give it a size of WP7, a stroke width of, let's say, 4, and a color of white. Okay, so we can see the back button and it goes over the image. That's because we use an absolute property on the safe area view. So let's copy this one more time to have a favorite icon as well. And this time we're going to have a margin right of 4. And let's change the icon to hard icon from the solid icons. And let's save this. Now you can see the hard icon as well. Now we need to be able to go back from this button, so let's add an on press method, and here we're gonna use our navigation hook. So let's create a navigation object, use navigation, and when we press on this button we need to use the function go back so that it goes back to the previous screen. We also need to have a state to toggle this favorite icon, so let's add a is favorite state, toggle favorite, and by default this will be false. And let's use this state, so when the user presses on this button we should be able to toggle this state. So toggle favorite, and we need to pass the inverse value of is favorite like this. And using that state we need to have a different color when it's activated. So when is favorite is true we need to show the red heart, otherwise it's going to be white. Okay, so let's test this out. And our toggle function is working and back button is also working. We can move to other destinations and it's working all as well. Now we need to show all the details about this destination, so let's add another view. Let's add a comment. So here we're gonna display the title, description, and a booking button. So let's add a view and give it a class of padding horizontal of 5, flex and flex 1, justify between, and a background of white, and a padding top of 8. So the idea is that we're going to have a view that has top rounded corners and it goes over this image right here like this. So we need to have our rounded corners at top, so let's add a style. Here we're going to add border top right and border top left radius, and after that we're going to add a negative margin top so that it goes over this image. So let's add border top right radius as well. Now the borders are rounded, but to see it we need to give it a negative margin top, so let's add a negative margin top of 14. Okay, now we can see the view and it has rounded corners. So let's add a scroll view inside this view because our content should be scrollable. And let's hide our indicators and give it a class name of vertical spacing of 5 like this. And inside this we're going to have another view for our title and the price. Let's give it a class name of flex row, justify between, and item start like this. And here let's add a text view for the title. So here we're going to add the item title, and we're going to have another view for the price of this destination. So let's just copy this one and add item price like this. Now let's add a class name to this text view to style our title, and this will have a fonts bold, flex 1 so that it takes all the space, and a text color of neutral 700 like this. And let's also give it a style to have a responsive font size of WP7 like this. And let's style our price, so let's just copy this font style to this and give it a color from our theme that we used before. So it's theme dot text. Okay, looking good. Now we need to add a dollar sign to this price like this, and we need to make it bold, so let's add a class name for font semi bold like this. Now looking good. So next we're gonna add a long description for the destination, so let's add a text view. And inside this we're going to have the item dot long description, because each item in the destinations have this property like this. And let's add a style to give it a font size of WP 3.7 like this. Let's also give it a class name to change its color, that will be neutral 700, and tracking should be wide and a margin bottom of 2. Now next thing we're gonna add is a view to show the duration, distance and a weather condition for this place. So let's add a view and give it a class name of flex row, justify between and a margin horizontal of 1. And inside this, for the first item, let's add a view with a class name of flex row, spacing horizontal of 2 and item start. And first of all, we're gonna add an icon which will be clock icon from our hero icons, and let's give it a size of WP7 and a color of sky blue like this. Now let's save this, and we have an icon for the clock. Now let's add another view for the duration text, and let's give it a class name of flex and spacing vertical of 2. And inside this, let's add a text view to show the duration of this destination. And here we can see the duration for this destination, and we're gonna also add a text that will say duration. And to style our duration, let's add a class name for the fonts bold and a text color of neutral 700. Let's save this. Now let's add a font size as well. So let's add our style property and use the font size of WP 4.5 like this. And let's add a class name for this duration text, which will be text of neutral 600 and a tracking wide. Okay, looking good. Now we need to copy this 2 more times to have a view for the distance and a weather condition. So let's just copy this 2 more times, and let's change the duration for the second to distance and the third one to sunny, because this will be a weather condition. Now let's change the text for these two. So for the second it's going to be distance, and for the third one it's going to be weather. Now we need to change the icons for the last two. So first one is clock, this should be a map pin icon, and for the third one it's going to be a sun icon. We need to change the sun icon color to orange, and for the second one it's going to be a specific red color for the map like this. So this part is finished. Now next we're gonna add a book now button. So let's add a touchable opacity after this scroll view and have a text that will say book now. Okay, we can see the button at the bottom. So let's style it and give it a class name of margin bottom of 6. Margin horizontal will be auto so that it centers. Flex justify center for the content and item center, and rounded full. Let's also give it a style, because we're going to have a color from our theme. So the background color will be from our theme dot background with an opacity of 0.8. And to make this button responsive, we're going to use height and width percentages. So let's use our WP15 for the height and a WP50 for the width like this. So the next thing we're gonna do is style our text inside this button. So let's add a class name for the text wide and fonts bold. Let's also increase the font size. So let's use style property and give it a font size of WP 5.5 like this. Looking good. So this screen is complete. Now let's do a final demo of the application. So let's move back, and at the top you can see the search bar and all the categories that you can scroll through. Then we have the sort categories. User can toggle the favorite icon on the destination. You can open the destination and see all the information. We have the title, price and all the information about the destination. So with this our application is complete, and if you find this video helpful, do like the video and subscribe the channel, and maybe share this video with your React Native friends. If you still have any questions about anything, you can ask them into the comment section. question and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. I'll leave the link of the GitHub repo for this project into the video description so you can check out the code or you can just run this app on your mobile. So this is it for this video. See you in the next one.